In this session before lunch, I have some questions. I don't know if you have a piece of paper or a pen or a tablet or something that you can write on. Maybe you just want to think about what I'm going to say. That's fine too. But I have some questions I'd like to ask you, and I'm going to give you just a second to think about the answer and either store that away in your mind or write it down, however you want to do that. But this session, we're going to be talking about passionate leaders. And I've got a lot of information here and some different books that I'm going to recommend to you, because I tell you, this has been one of those areas for me that has been a continual research project. In my mind, I just can't help but think if we could determine what people are passionate about, that would be awesome. But wouldn't it be awesome to be able to determine how passionate they are about it? What's their level of passion in regards to that? And so I'm going to share some things with you that I've kind of collected over the last several years. But this is one of those areas I kind of like to start off just asking you a couple of questions. Number one, what do you want to accomplish with your life? I just think about that for a second. Maybe write something down, or just, like I said, store it away in your mind. But what do you really want to accomplish with your life? Number two, why do you want to do that? Whatever it is, whatever you want to accomplish with your life, whether great or small, doesn't matter, whatever it is that you want to accomplish with your life, I think the important questions you have to consider is why. Why do you want to accomplish that? Third question is, do you believe that you can achieve it? You know, it's one thing to have a dream and to think about something, you know, it'd really be cool if I could do that. And here's why I would like to do that, but I just don't really believe I can. I think that's kind of where we get mixed up sometimes, is that third question. Do we really believe that we can achieve it? Because here's the thing I've come to believe. If you have that kind of faith that you can achieve it, are you going to face some obstacles? Yeah. Going to have to climb some mountains? Yeah. Going to have to walk through some valleys? Yeah. May have to deal with some success, may have to deal with some failure. But the thing is if you believe it, then you do it. So the last question is just this. What are you most passionate about in your life? What are you most passionate about? Now the beauty of this is, if your answer to that last question aligns with what you want to accomplish and why you want to do it, and the fact that you believe you can do it, then that's a great thing. But a lot of times we answer one way on those first three, but then the last one is really not aligned with it. It's not what I'm really most passionate about. So the intent for me, as I go through this lesson, I really want you to think in terms of how do you get aligned with what you're passionate most about, with what you want to accomplish, why you want to accomplish it, and creating the kind of faith that you can accomplish. So several years ago, I began this journey, and it kind of started, oddly enough, with an article that I read by a guy named Darren Hardy. I know that print's kind of small down there, but Darren Hardy is the founder of Success Magazine, and he had actually written a book called The Entrepreneurial Roller Coaster, Why Now's the Time to Join the Ride. But I didn't read the book, I read the article that came from the book, which really got my attention. Because in that, he talks about this idea of 4 passion switches. And here's kind of the way this works. The first passion switch is this idea of being passionate about what you do. Now, there are a lot of people in this world that are passionate about what they do. Sometimes it's because they're really good at it, but a lot of times it's because they've dedicated their life to doing it. And so they work hard to do that. I don't know if you've watched the Olympics or not, but to me, I'm always impressed with just what people can do within a short period of time. I mean, from 30 seconds to about 3 minutes, you have people in the Olympics that do things that are absolutely incredible. Now, I'm going to tell this story tomorrow morning, so I'm going to tell it to you guys because most of you aren't going to be here tomorrow morning. So I think it's fascinating that people do these things. And I don't believe that breakdancing is an Olympic sport. And I happen to be on the reservation in Arizona doing a workshop one Sunday, and I did this lesson from the Gospel of Mark, and I was talking about just how incredible it is what some of these people do. And I made that statement that I don't believe that breakdancing is an Olympic sport. And of course, everybody kind of responded the way you did, but they had a potluck after service, and this young lady walked up to me after service and she said, "I'm a breakdancer, and it is an Olympic sport." And I was like, "I'm sorry, it was a joke. I wasn't intending it to be serious." But you know, she was passionate about what she did. And the thing about when we're passionate about what we do, there are a lot of challenges to it, but we're willing to deal with whatever it takes in order to do that, because we're passionate about it. The second passion switch is being passionate about why you do it. Now this one is also very significant, because why you do something might be because of personal gain. It might be because it benefits others. It might be because it's going to advance something that you feel is a just cause. I mean, there are a lot of reasons that fall into this category, but when people are passionate about what they do, it's generally because they understand why they're doing it. And that why is very, very significant, as we'll talk about in just a few moments. And then the third passion switch is being passionate about how you do it. Now, I travel all over the country, and I try to stay most of the time with folks. I don't care to stay in hotels, but I can tell you in my lifetime, I've stayed in enough hotels to tell you there is a difference. There is a difference in hotels. I've stayed in some hotels to where when you go into the room, you kind of turn around and walk out. It's like, this is not going to work for me. I will not be able to sleep here. But I've also gone in hotels to where you can tell the difference when people have a sense of passion about how they do things, because there's a level of quality that is done when somebody's passionate about how they do it. Because it's more important about the quality they put into it than it is exactly what they're doing. Does that make sense? You know, it's been interesting to me. I teach, I taught at Bear Valley Bible Institute for 8 years, and I've been teaching at Sunset now for the last couple of years, and I teach a number of different classes, and you can always tell the difference in the students who are passionate about how they do it over what they do. Some students are just doing enough to get by. But some students are concerned about the quality with which they do it. They'll proofread. They'll use all the tools that are available to them to make sure that what they're writing and they're submitting is done well. Passion. Passionate about not just what you do and why you do it, but being passionate about how you do it. And the fourth passion switch is being passionate about who you do it for. Now, for some people in the corporate world, they're doing this for their company. For some people, they're doing it for their families. Some, they do it for themselves. But, you know, there are a number of answers to that question about who you do it for. But when you put those four things together, it's pretty important to realize that when someone is passionate about what they do and why they do it, how they do it, and who they do it for, then you're going to be able to see that. You don't hide that from people. Now, as I thought about those four passion switches, I thought there's got to be a biblical example that aligns with that. And not that I was trying to proof text scripture in order to support this idea, but it was interesting to me how naturally it flowed to look at the Apostle Paul. And the text that I want to use here is 1 Corinthians 9, verses 14 and following. And if you want to open your Bibles to that or look them up on your phones, however you're going to do that, there are some things here that I think are very important for us to get from this text, because Paul, his life aligned with those four passion switches. So the first passion switch that we talked about was being passionate about what you do. I want you to look, if you would, at verse 16. What does it say that Paul was passionate about doing in verse 16? Preach the gospel. I mean, it's pretty clear that that's what he was passionate about doing. Preach the gospel. I call this the compulsory rule, because Paul states here, I'm under compulsion. He says, woe to me if I do not preach the gospel. Well, that's pretty clear, isn't it? I mean, he was passionate about what he did. Now, the second one, I think, is also seen in this text, and that's being passionate about why he did it. Now, this one is very interesting because you see it in verse 19, you see it in verses 22 through 23, but really you see it throughout the whole text. I call it the so that principle. I have to laugh, Rick, several times over the last 2 days. You made this statement, I'm that guy. And the reason that's been funny to me is because when I was teaching at Bear Valley, I have this obsession with the number of times that people use the word that in a sentence when it's not needed. And so I was like this dictator Nazi when it came to grading papers, and people would use the word that so many times. In fact, my son-in-law, it took a class of mine there at Bear Valley, and it was in Old Testament, and so he wrote the paper, and he submitted it, and I called him up, and I said, I want you to come over to the office. And when he got there, I said, all I want you to do is, I handed the papers, I want you to read just this sentence right here. He used the word that 6 times in one sentence. As he was reading through it, he just kind of hung his head. So I had that reputation really quickly. I got that reputation of being that guy. The funniest part about it was the next quarter, I was teaching a class in sermon preparation and presentation. And so one of the students, a guy by the name of James Coker, he got this text. And so when he got up to preach that text, he said, Brother Turner, Paul was that guy. Because when you look at the text, you can't help but recognize why Paul did what he did. He says, though I am free from all men, I've made myself a slave. Finish it for me. So that I might win them more. To the Jew, I became a Jew. So that I might win the Jew. To those who are under the law, as under the law, so that, y'all are catching on very quickly here, so that I might win those who are under the law. To those who are without law, so that I might win those who are without law. You're getting there, I love it. To the weak, I became weak. So that I might win those who are weak. I've become all things to all men, so that I might win them over and over and over again. That's the reason I call it the so that principle. Why did Paul do what he did? So that he might win souls for Jesus. You talk about passion. Paul was passionate about what he did, but why he did it was that he might win people to Jesus. But he was also passionate about how he did it. I call this the law of the second mile, or the law of flexibility. Now, for years, I haven't gone last year, and I'm not going to get to go this next year, but for years, I've gone to Guatemala. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Hiawatha Jones and Byron Benitez and the work that they're doing in Guatemala City, but I have gone down there. Those guys have been friends of mine for a long time, and I've gone to their workshop every year and their lectureship for a number of years anyway. And the thing I always thought was funny, that after I got familiar with things, they didn't pick me up at the airport anymore. They told me just to take the shuttle. But the first few years when I would go down there, everybody that came, we would get out of the airport, we'd get over to the van, and they would say, okay, we've got some ground rules we need to go over. The first of which is, you are now in Guatemala. You are not in the United States. That means that you're on Guatemalan time, not U.S. time. He said the key word here is be flexible. Because we don't start on time, we start when everybody gets here. And I'm like, that don't bother me, that's cool, I like that. But you see, in the U.S., we're time-oriented people, not event-oriented people. That's why when the clock says 10 after, I'm saying, let's go, sing the song, let's get this thing moving. But the thing is, that's our culture. We're very time-oriented, even in work and school and everything about our life has a starting point, has an ending point, even down to our assembly time, which frustrates me. But anyway, this idea of the law of the second mile, or the law of flexibility, is seen in the way that Paul says, though I am free from all men, I made myself a slave to all. Can you imagine? And we talked about that concept of being a slave earlier, that Paul made himself a slave to all. And it says that to the Jew, he became as a Jew, that he might win the Jew. To those who are under the law, as under the law, though he knew he wasn't under the law, but under the law of Christ, but that he wanted to win those who were under the law. To those who were without law, as without law, and you and I both know that Paul didn't go out here and start getting involved in immorality and sin because of people who were under the law, but there are things that we might need to be flexible enough to do to those who are not in Christ so that we might win those who are in Christ. You know, the key thing, I believe, is that we can't expect them to come to us. The church building was never designed to be a place for people in the world to come to us so that we can teach them. You see, Christianity isn't what takes place here. Christianity is what takes place when we go out those doors and what happens in the way that we live in the world around us. Paul says to the weak, I became weak. I've become all things to all men. Now, we're going to have to be pretty flexible in order to do those kinds of things, don't you think? Jesus said, if somebody compels you to go 1 mile, go with them 2. They ask for your shirt, give them your coat. Slap you on one cheek, turn the other. You see, all of that's foundational to what Paul's talking about here. If we're going to be passionate about how we do it, it's going to be about the quality with which we approach this thing, not just the quantity. And that means we're going to have to be flexible. It's going to take time. But obviously, the last passion switch, being passionate about who you do it for, is what I call the ultimate axiom, and who he did it for was the Lord. I mean, you know as well as I do that what Paul did was because of Jesus. That's who he was doing this for. And I think when we understand that, it changes our lives in what we do, why we do it, how we do it, when we know who we're doing this for. And so I think those passion switches are very significant. So that was kind of the beginning of this journey, was this whole concept of these 4 passion switches. The what, the why, the how, and the who. And knowing those things, I think, provides some great direction for us when we think about our passion and what it is that we are passionate about. So from that, I came across this book. And it was interesting getting this book. I really recommend it, actually. Steve Moore is now the president of Growing Leaders. I mentioned earlier Tim Elmore, who was the founder of Growing Leaders and their organization at growingleaders.com. Well, Steve Moore is now the president. Well, back before he became president, he was a writer for the articles that they put out on their blog posts on a regular basis. Well, he had written this article about passion. And I was so intrigued because he made reference to this idea of a passion profile. That you can determine by taking this profile what someone was passionate about and the level of passion that they possess. And I'm thinking, we could use this in the church. Until I found out how much it costs. Now I was like, yeah, I probably don't need to take that. But I was blessed enough to be able to talk with him. And I told him, I mean, it turns out that we were both graduates from Fuller Theological Seminary, and so we had that connection, but we talked about a lot of different things. And I told him I was very interested in this book. I told him I couldn't find it. He said, well, it's no longer in print. He said, but I have one. He said, and I'll send it to you. And so he did. He sent that book to me. And I just consumed it. It sits on my shelf, and it's an incredibly good book. Because what he does is he talks about two types of passions, if you will, or 2 streams of passion, as he refers to it. There is an interest-based passion, and there is an issues-based passion. So So I want to try to explain the differences between these two and kind of pull it together with some other things he talked about in the book. An interest-based passion is where ability and aptitude are going to meet opportunity. And generally speaking, these are going to be areas, if you will, that are pleasurable for us. They're things that we do for fun or that we do for leisure. In addition to that, it's also activities that maybe we have some natural abilities in. So there are a lot of people who are passionate about sports. Some, maybe it's golf, maybe basketball. I've got a grandson who's 6'6". Let me tell you, I don't know that I've met a human more passionate about basketball than that boy. And he started in the 8th grade. I'm like, why weren't you doing this when you were like 4? It would have made a big difference. But he didn't start until the 8th grade. But I bet he spends at least 2 to somewhere around 5 hours a day practicing. He's passionate about basketball. That's his interest. Now, maybe your interest isn't sports. Maybe it's, I guess it could be a sport, fishing or hunting, or maybe you're passionate about other things that you have an interest in. Say it again. Could be breakdancing. That was quick. I like that. And it may be issues-based passion is where experience is going to meet empathy. Now, this one is quite different because this one deals with areas that are going to create more fulfillment or purpose for your life, and maybe even something that you're thinking in terms of a legacy. And again, these are going to be things that emerge, generally speaking, from either personal experience or they're going to be areas that someone you know has experienced. To give you an idea, there are a lot of people who are passionate about the social injustices that exist in our world. It may be physical abuse, it could be mental abuse, it could be sexual abuse, it could be, I mean, the list goes on and on of all these types of issues that we're dealing with in our world that people get very passionate about. You know, my son-in-law, our daughter and son-in-law, they're very passionate about a couple of different things, one of which is the homeless community and how do we help the homeless, and recovering addicts, people who are dealing with either recovery from alcohol or drug addiction or pornography. They're very passionate about helping those people. In fact, if my son-in-law were able to get a full-time job in jail chaplaincy, I think he would do that because he loves working in the jail, in the prison, helping those guys deal with the challenges they're focused on in their life. Now, part of that's because he's got people he knows who have experienced that. And he's very passionate about it. And so there are a lot of different things that fall into this category of issues-based passion. And the funny thing is in this book, he developed what he calls the passion pyramid. And I want to go through, there are 4 levels here of passion that he describes in the book. I want to go through each one of them with you, but I'll go through them and then I'll come back and kind of connect you to the idea of what we're looking at, maybe as an application to an issues-based passion. And I use this homeless as an illustration. So the first level is this idea if you want to learn more about it. So let's just say, for example, that you have a passion, an issues-based passion for helping people who are homeless. So what you want to do is you want to spend some time learning about that. You might want to call up some YouTube videos to watch some people who talk about the homeless community and maybe what causes people to reach a point where they're homeless. You might want to read some articles. I know there are a number of books that have been written about it, but you want to study, you want to learn as much as you can about the homeless community. And so you're learning about this. That's the first level of passion here. The second is you get engaged in some activities. So maybe what you're going to start doing is you're going to pack some bags with lunch or water, or maybe you're going to put together some bags that have socks, maybe some other toiletry items, some things like that, and you're going to go down, you're going to get engaged in some activities, you're going to start handing some of that stuff out. Or maybe what you're thinking is, you know, this year at Thanksgiving, what we're going to do is we're going to take our family down to the soup kitchen, we're going to help the homeless and feed them, and we're going to sit down, we're going to kind of get to know their stories. So this is the second level of passion that's involved. So you've learned about it. Now you want to get engaged in some of those activities. The third level is you're going to start influencing others about it. So now it's no longer that I've learned about it and I'm engaged in it. I'm going to try to influence you to get involved in this. And so I'm going to start telling you about some of the people I've met. I'm going to start talking to you about some of their stories and some of the challenges that they're facing. And I'm going to try to get you involved in helping get to this same work because I'm passionate about it. You know, earlier when I said that we need to plug people into what they're passionate about in the church, because when someone is passionate about an activity or a work, then what they're going to do is they're going to start influencing others. That's what we need. We need people who are doing the things they're passionate about because they're going to start saying, hey, I want you to come help me. And it's not this, we need volunteers who are willing to do, and then nobody signs up. And so that's the third level. The fourth level is even when sacrifice is required. You see, not only am I going to influence others, now I'm going to be willing to make some sacrifices in order to do this. Now, in the book, he talks about really this being the pinnacle of the pyramid. And I think he even references the Apostle Paul as being this level. He's a level 4 leader because he's willing to make sacrifice, as we talked about from 1 Corinthians 9. Read 2 Corinthians 11. I mean, you're going to find that the Apostle Paul was willing to make the sacrifice, whatever that took for him, in order to get to this level. Now, for me, I see this more as a cycle. Because if I ever get to the point that I'm willing to make a sacrifice, you can rest assured I'm going to go back and I'm going to learn more about it. So I'm going to start trying to figure out more that maybe I didn't get the first time around. I'm going to read more books. I'm going to watch more video clips. And then I'm going to get engaged in more activities. No longer am I going to do this like at Thanksgiving and Christmas, but I'm going to start spending maybe one time a week or maybe even more where I can go and get involved in the homeless community so that I can help them. And then I'm going to start influencing more and more people. I may even start my own YouTube channel. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start talking about what I'm experiencing in the homeless community to try to influence more on a greater basis through the means of online. And try to help get others connected to this. And I'm certainly going to start talking to more people personally, face to face, especially my friends and family members. I want to influence them to also get involved in this because the impact it's having on the homeless community. And I'm just going to make greater sacrifices. And I'm going to make a greater sacrifice because, again, it's just a cycle to me. Because the things that I'm passionate about, once I get to a level of making a sacrifice, I'm going to start learning more. I'm going to start getting engaged more. I'm going to start influencing more. And I'm going to start making even greater sacrifices. So that's the idea behind this concept of passion that I have been studying and thinking about and looking at. Here's the thing. A lot of times when we think about passion and how we recognize passion is when people are excited about something. You know, my grandson, he loves playing basketball. He's excited about playing basketball. He's passionate about it. But passion isn't about just enthusiasm and excitement. The word comes to us from a Latin word that means to suffer. Do you remember the movie, The Passion of the Christ? The suffering of the Christ. So I'm not going to ask for a show of hands. I'm not going to ask you to do not answer this question because this is not a question to be answered. But I want you to think in your mind, just where are you on that pyramid? Now, I'm not going to answer it for you, but I will tell you that far too often with many people that I have met and talked to, we're somewhere right here. We've learned about Christianity, and we think Christianity is a great thing. It's a great life. And, you know, God's blessed my life. We talk about those kind of things. And we even get engaged in some activities. I mean, the reason you are here is because you're engaged in some activities about Christianity. The challenge becomes in taking that step to the third level, where now I'm going to start influencing other people. On my job, in my community, in my neighborhood, are we influencing others by telling them about Christianity? You see, that's where things get a little more sticky. Now, we've been joking all week about this idea of introverted versus extroverted. And some people are very introverted, and some people are extroverted. I learned recently at a family camp that I went to speak at that I'm an ambivert. I'd never even heard of that before, but I'm an ambivert. And what that means is I'm an introvert who that when I'm around other Christians, and I'm around people that I know, yeah, I'm going to talk. I'm going to get engaged. I may even come up to introduce myself, even though I may not know you. But I figure you're here for a reason. And so I probably would come up and speak to you and talk, and we're going to have a conversation. But if you go to the airport with me tomorrow afternoon, and I'll guarantee you, if I speak 10 words, it'll be miraculous. Because I'm going to be over in the corner, sitting down with my earbuds in and a book in hand, and I'm going to be reading, or I'm going to be on the phone talking with my wife, or I'm going to do those things. But I'm not going to be engaging people that I do not know in a conversation. I'm an ambivert. I just think that's so funny. Never heard that before. But the thing is this. I've got to get to this point. Because Christianity was never meant to be kept to ourselves. It's about influencing others, being the salt of the world, the light of the world. I mean, it's about that influence that we have in the lives of others. So there are a couple of things I want to share with you as we wrap up this session and kind of proceed to the direction of lunch. When I think about the idea of passionate leaders are able to see the need that exists. According to the World Census Bureau, every second, 1.8 people die. 1.8. What that means is that in the time that it takes you to listen to a 30-minute sermon, 3,480 people will die. Most, if not all, are going to stand before the throne of God, and they are not ready. When I think about what it is that we are passionate about, there are a lot of things. I'm passionate about my grandkids. I'm passionate about leadership. I've given my life, what's left of it, to studying and trying to help churches in areas of leadership, because I think that need is great. I think churches need to be more passionate about how they approach preparing and developing others, especially the next generation, to prepare them to lead. Because if we don't do that, there may not be a church to be led in the future in our community. But I also understand the urgency of reaching people with the message of Jesus. And here's the thing. God doesn't have any other plan than you and me. We are the instruments through which God is going to work to influence people. Now here's the thing. You have people in your life, friends, family, co-workers, fellow students, I don't know, but you have people in your life that I will probably never meet. You are a walking gospel to them. You may be the only message of Jesus they ever have the opportunity to Him? Can you see that need? You know, sometimes, and I use that illustration of how many people die every second. And it becomes so overwhelming to us to think 3,480 people, I'm never going to be able to reach 3,480 people. You don't have to. Your task and my task is to find the one. I know you've heard the story of the starfish. A little boy walking along the beach just pitching starfish back out into the ocean. An older gentleman came on behind him and he said, what you're doing is not making any difference. The beach goes on for miles. There are millions of starfish. He said it makes a difference to the one. And that's the mindset we have to have. That's the reason I encouraged you earlier to think about that 1%. Family, friend, co-worker, fellow student, whoever it is, neighbor, be praying about them. See the need that exists. Because when we see the need, then things begin to change. We also need to know the value of the gift that we have to offer. You ever think about what Jesus offered people? He didn't build them houses, didn't give them clothes, didn't give them money. What Jesus gave people, they couldn't exchange for anything of a monetary value. Because what Jesus gave them was what our world still needs today, that He gave them. Hope. He gave them hope. Now, it's challenging to me, and it's hurtful to think that we live in a world that there are so many people who exist on a false hope. Maybe it's because of what they were taught, or maybe it's just something they were wishing for, but you know, this idea of just wishful thinking. And sadly, many in the church are kind of almost in that same boat. I mean, the confidence of knowing if you died, would you go to heaven? And they're like, I hope so. There's no confidence, there's no earnest expectation and desire for those things. But Jesus didn't die to give us that kind of hope. He died to give us the kind of hope that is that earnest expectation and desire. But the worst part for me is how many people in this world have no hope. They're living with no hope. And we have it. We have it. And so we have to ask ourselves, what are we going to do about it? Because the third piece here involves understanding the sacrifice. Understanding the sacrifice. I've taught leadership, I don't know, almost 20 years. I've been studying it for 30 plus years. And there's so much that I have yet to learn. I know so little in this area of leadership. But when I've taught leadership and I've talked about this idea of sacrifice, because I've always heard the higher you go in leadership, the greater the sacrifice you have to make. And I think that's true. I think the higher you go in leadership, the greater the sacrifice you're going to have to make. And so I've had students over the years ask the question, what sacrifice will I have to make? I don't know the answer to that. I've asked them, what sacrifice do you think someone will have to make to be a leader in God's church? Time? Money? Family? Privacy? I don't know. There's a lot to be added to the list. Do you remember when Jesus told the apostles that He was going away, and where He was going they could not come? And Peter, there at the end of John chapter 13, is like, where are you going that I cannot come? And you remember the statement that he makes? I'm willing to lay down my life for you. And I'm sure in that moment he thought he would. And probably did. Maybe that's why he pulled the sword out in the garden and whacked off Malchus's ear. I don't know. But do you remember the question that Jesus asks him? You want to do a great study in the Bible? Do a study of the questions that are asked. Old Testament, study the questions that were asked by God. New Testament, study the questions that were asked by Jesus. And this one to me is the most significant. Because Peter makes this statement, I'm willing to lay down my life for you. And Jesus asks him this, will you? Will you lay down your life for me? Of course, you know, he goes on to tell him that he's going to deny him 3 times. Can't imagine how that must have affected Peter when he heard it. And I never ask for a show of hands. I don't ever ask people, would you be willing to lay down your life for Jesus? The fact that you gave up a Saturday to come here would tell me that everyone in this room would raise their hand and say, I'm willing to lay down my life for Jesus. I just don't think it's the right question. The question I think we need to ask is this: will you live for Jesus? Because if you're not willing to live for Jesus, you'd never be willing to die for him, even though in a workshop like this you raise your hand. The thing is, will we live for Jesus? So when the question is asked, what sacrifice am I going to have to make? I don't think it's the right question. I think we have to ask the question. And that question is, will you make it? Whatever that sacrifice is, the question is, will you make it? My dad, when he was alive, had a very dear friend who also has since passed away. But when he died, I inherited his library. And one of the items that he gave me when he was alive, I still have in my office. I don't ever carry it with me because I don't want to lose it. But it's a little round button. I'm not sure if it's a lapel pin or if it's a tie clip. I'm not sure what the intent was when he gave me to use it for. But I don't think he gave it to me to use. I think he gave it to me because of the 3 words that were on it. And those 3 words were simply this: whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. If we're going to be passionate leaders, then we're going to have to develop that mindset. Because whatever I have to sacrifice, I'm going to be willing to do that because I know not only what I'm passionate about, I not only know why I'm passionate about it, and how passionate I am about it, but I know who I do this for. And I think if we can ever communicate those 4 things about our passion and our passion level, then I think people are going to understand. And when we're willing to do whatever it takes, the church wins. The church wins. I'm so thankful that you came here today. And we're about to take a break for some lunch. And after we come back from lunch, at 1 o'clock, we're going to do a lesson that deals with godly character and what godly character looks like. And we're going to study Psalm 15. I'm going to share some things that maybe you haven't considered before from that psalm. But after that, we'll take another short break. And the last session today, that begins at 2 o'clock, we're going to focus on the idea of how do you equip and develop the next generation? How do you equip and prepare leaders for the future? Whether that's mid-range leaders or new leaders that are coming up, whoever that is, how do we equip and prepare them to lead in the future? So I hope that after lunch you'll stay and that you'll be a part of our afternoon sessions as we think about and talk about not only the character that God desires of us as his leaders, but how do we develop that in the next generation? So thank you. Look at that.
So
those